This is my history interview project. So the first person that I interviewed was my grandma. My grandma graduated high school in 1961 in Michigan, where she still lives. She went to a very small private Catholic school with 160 boys and girls in total. She said that the school wasn't too cliquey because of the lack of students. There was not that many. She was in the second most popular group, and that's her friend group in the far right photo on prom. She said she was overall a very good child. She followed rules. She didn't sneak out much or drink. However, she did smoke cigarettes, which was very popular at the time. She never really got detentions except for one time when she talked back to a nun, which was a big thing back in the day to have nuns at Catholic schools. She had a job at an S&H green stand, which is kind of just like a farmer's market stand, where she made $1.33 per hour. Her parents for a living were both salespeople. Her mom stayed at home and was a saleswoman. However, her father traveled a lot as a salesman. The fashion of her day was short hair, as you can see she has in the first photo, rolled up uniform skirts, pleated skirts with sweaters, and what she liked to call mushroom shoes. She said people for dates typically would go ice skating, tobogganing, because it is in Michigan, so it's pretty cold in the winter. And then they would all go to sock hops or their school dances. These are just some popular things that she liked and that were popular back in her day. So she would always go to the Big Boy restaurant, which is the picture on the left, with her friends. It was a popular hangout spot. And the Chevy Bel Air, which is the car on the top, was very popular at the time, and it was like the most desired car. And then for music, she would listen to the Beach Boys, that's just a picture of them. The Beatles and Chuck Berry were her favorites. She did not get to go to concerts because at the time her family could not afford it, but she did enjoy listening to that music. So now getting more into historic stuff, her heroes at the time were Eisenhower, because he had just signed a Civil Rights Act, which she supported because at her time it was mainly still segregated. And she supported the Civil Rights Movement, and so she loved when Eisenhower signed that act. And the president at the time that she can remember was John F. Kennedy. And what she remembers from his presidency was staying up late with her girlfriend, seeing if he would be elected. And her opinions on him were she liked him because he was the first Catholic president, which she supported because she comes from a very Catholic and religious family. And she also thought he was very handsome, so she loved him for those two qualities. However, girls in her day did not typically have very many political views and opinions of their own, so she didn't really think much further than those two qualities. And these are just some pictures of some major events that happened, historical events that happened in her time. So we have the Watergate scandal, Alaska and Hawaii becoming states, and the Chinese famine, which she told me about, which I had never heard of before, that killed over 30 million Chinese. So the main historic event we talked about was the Watergate scandal. And she remembers at the time that it was very confusing for her, and not everyone knew what happened until two journalists blew it out of the water, and the true meaning behind it was exposed, which everyone was very shocked, and it became a very big deal, and it was a big surprise. So the Watergate scandal began on June 17th, 1972, when burglars were arrested for going into the office of the Democratic National Committee in Washington, D.C. And these men were connected to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, and the robbers had been caught wiretaping phones and stealing documents. Nixon tried to cover up this event, but later, when reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein revealed his role in what had happened, Nixon resigned on August 9th, 1974. So for my second interview, I interviewed my mom. These are just some pictures of my mom throughout high school. The first one is of her in her school cafeteria with all of her friends. The second one is my mom, her parents, my grandparents, and her grandmother, who's my great-grandmother. And the last photo is of my mom and all of her friends when they went to prom. So my mom, like my grandma, was a overall very good student. She got straight A's, and my mom was on the varsity basketball team all 4 years of high school. So she usually hung out with the more athletic crowd. My mom worked a job over the summer at her local golf course where she made $6 an hour. At the time, big hair, perms, jeans, rugby shirts, and crew neck sweaters were the main sense of style. My mom did go to an all-girls school, so she said she really didn't date in high school, but she would have dates to dances from boys who went to the all-boys school. And so next we have her favorite place to hang out with all of her friends, where she would usually go, was Chi-Chi's, which is a Mexican restaurant. And she loved this so much because they would give out free chips and salsa, so her and her friends could go there for pretty cheap and not have to pay much. And then her favorite artists of the time for music were Michael Jackson, Prince, the Black Crowes, and George Michael. And George Michael was her very first concert that she got to go to. And then popular cars at the time was the Mazda Miata, which is the red car on the right, and Mustangs were also very popular at the time. And her heroes, or people she looked up to at the time, were her dad, my grandpa, and Tim Russert, who was a MSNBC political commentator. My mom has always been into politics and has had very strong opinions, so she really loved him. So now we're going to talk about some historic events that happened in my mom's life. So the first was the death of John F. Kennedy, which she described as to be very sudden and surprising for the whole country. And she actually saved this magazine that has an article on it from August 2nd of 1999. And the second was the impeachment trials of President Clinton and all of the debates that was going on with that. And she also saved a news article from the New York Times. And then I would say one of the biggest historic events of her life was the tech revolution of the late 90s to early 2000s. So this was when new digital products were being invented and really coming into play into the daily lives of people, rather than just having these tech devices be available to large companies. It was being more put into everyday homes where people could use in their everyday life. So in 1996, the VHS was no longer of much use anymore because the new gadget, the DVD, had been invented. This took a big play in my mom's life, and I know we still have some DVDs in our basement, and this was just really such a big new trend and just a whole new way of using technology for people in the late 90s to early 2000s. And also the invention of the internet. My mom said she remembers going to work and the internet now being really accessible and available to everyone, and she had to ask around how to use it because it was so new and she did not know how to use it. Also, she got her first cell phones instead of using the typical phone that was attached to the kitchen wall, which she remembers using in high school, that had a long cord that if you wanted to go have a conversation with someone, you would have to go into another room. She remembers getting her first flip phone, her first phone ever, at 27, and her first BlackBerry at 30. And then my dad finally convinced her to get her first smartphone at 35. So the tech revolution was a major event that happened in my mom's lifetime that has forever changed and shaped how we use technology today. So finally, we have my own personal interview. So here I just included some pictures that have been really relevant for my lifetime. We have COVID, of course, the 2020 election, and then a picture of my whole family, and actually the two people that I interviewed, my grandma, who's in that photo, and then my mom, who's also in that photo. So this project has really helped me recognize how the study of historical events can really have a meaning and a relevance and affect my life today, because just hearing about how my mom and my grandma's lives were in high school, I can relate them to my own life. Just both going to Catholic schools and how we were raised and brought up, and all of our morals are really just similar and the same, and the importance of good grades and being good people. My mom has always raised me by that, and my grandma raised my mom by that. So it's continuing in our generations, and it's so cool to hear how two other generations have that same aspect in their lives. And also the political scandals and all of that, I can also completely relate to my own life with the 2020 election, and obviously many other political scandals of our lifetime right now. My grandma, especially talking about Watergate, I can really relate that to some politicians in my day, and how it really hasn't changed, and that sort of slimy way of politics has really stayed the same over the years. My family's history definitely affects my personal identity and culture and my lifestyle. I'm super grateful for all that I have, and just hearing how my mom and my grandma were raised just makes me realize how lucky I am for everything that I have, and how hard my parents have worked to really get us the life that we had, because my grandma and my mom could not afford a lot of things growing up. So their high school experiences were also very different than mine, just because of the situation that they were in. And my experience of COVID-19 will definitely affect how I see things in 20 years. I really started to be grateful for everything ever since COVID has happened, and really not take anything for granted, like seeing friends and family without having to social distance or wear masks, and going to large events without, having to social distance or do any of that, has just been something that I have now been even more grateful for. And these are finally just my proof of interview. So it's my mom holding up the magazine about the death of John F. Kennedy, and then just a screenshot of my call with my grandma.